Welcome to a bonus series on the Life Giver podcast. Made possible by the USO, these bonus episodes are from a monthly series called You're Leaving Again, where the USO is following Matt and I during our deployment, and we are sharing our authentic story with you. Whether you're going through your own deployment, or geo-bachelor, on an unaccompanied tour, or maybe getting ready to, this series aims to be the first of its kind. Real life, gritty, but resourceful content aimed to help you keep your marriage and family strong while you're apart. So whether you're a military spouse or a service member, this series is for you. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, or head outside for a walk and listen in as Matt and I share what we are learning apart with you. It's great to be with all of you guys. My name is Corey. Matt. We didn't match on purpose, but it just kind of worked out that way.
I actually have less shirts to choose from, so she has greater options. So she's constantly matching me. I can't help it.
Oh, goodness. We are so glad to spend some time with you guys. Just a real quick, for those of you guys who are new to this series, the USO, like they said, has been following Matt and I during this deployment. And what we really wanted to do from the beginning was to put out content that we felt like is not anywhere else. When we talk about what is it like for a military couple to spend some time apart, whether it's through trainings or deployments or an unaccompanied tour or anything like that, where some of you have geo-bached before or are geo-batching, this military lifestyle puts us through these situations where we have to spend some time apart and figure out how to continue to build our marriage and keep our families strong. And so in the USO, when we talked with them about allowing them to follow us during a deployment, we really wanted to be authentic and share our journey, but also put out some hopefully helpful content that will help you guys as you maybe are going through some similar things. And so if you're just now joining us, there are other parts of the series where we kind of covered almost everything, like before he left and what that was like to go through the first month apart. We've covered parenting and intimacy and holidays and all kinds of stuff.
Recovering from big wounds.
Recovering from big wounds. That happens a lot in marriages when there's time apart. And so today we're going to talk all about reintegration and coming back together. And Matt, you've been home for about 2 weeks?
Yeah, about 2 weeks. Yeah.
So I had a good friend that texted me yesterday and she was like, kudos to you for going through reintegration and talking about it at the same time. So we're going to do the best that we can. We would love to hear questions. If you have them, we are definitely going to take your questions. Some of you posted those questions when you registered for this. And so we have those pulled up as well. And so we're going to take some time during this first hour to give you as much of the content and updates from us as possible. And then if you can stick around after that first hour, we're just going to spend some extra time answering your questions or taking any new ones too. So we're going to just share just for a minute what our reintegration has been like so far, because we really wanted to be honest with you guys. I know we have been talking about this a lot in the last couple of weeks. I've been thinking about it a lot and really being self-aware of kind of what I'm going through, what my thoughts have been, what my feelings have been throughout the reintegration. It's been a little bit of an up and down kind of roller coaster for me, I would say. And one of the things that kind of keeps coming to my mind is actually some mentoring advice that I got from another spouse. It's a while ago, who said, it doesn't get easier or better. It's just different. And so each time you go through that separation or deployment or reintegration, and I don't want that to sound discouraging, because it actually was encouraging for me, because there was a lot of similarities that I felt like I went through as a spouse during this reintegration to the last, couple of reintegrations we went through. But it was still different because I'm different than I was before. Our kids are older, and some of your questions definitely related to parenting. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But for me, I know there was a lot of ups and downs of feelings going on. And so you've been home for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we'd love to know in the comments, are you going through a deployment or a military initiated separation right now? Do you have reintegration coming up? Are you in the middle of reintegration? Give us a little bit of feedback. We love interaction with you guys. I think it just kind of comes to life when we can kind of ping back and forth with what's happening in the chat. So I don't mind starting.
Sure.
Unless you want to start.
I thought you already had, so okay. I was letting you go.
I would say, first of all, this deployment was one of the more challenging deployments for me personally. The first deployment that we went through was challenging in that we lost a lot of soldiers, and we went through a lot of understanding and learning how to care for our community, how to step in and serve within our community. I learned a lot in that first deployment of how to let other people care for me, and develop the camaraderie that happens within the military culture. And so that one was very challenging. But this one was different in that we had kind of just moved here, and it was 4 or 5 months into being here that he deployed. The kids had just started new schools, and we were kind of still integrating into the house and the community. And then we also I had a lot of stress that happened during this deployment that wasn't necessarily something that I brought on myself. We had the ice storm that happened here in Texas. The kids got COVID in the middle of that ice storm. We were up and down and dealing with quarantine and school, being in school, out of school, and trying to help them through that. And so there was just a lot of things that went on. In fact, like right before he came home, we actually had a situation where there was a guy that was on my doorstep that we had to call the police on about. And so that was like just a lot of stress to go through that I had not invited and was trying to navigate through. And I just have to be honest. And I'd love to know if there's anybody else that is in the chat, maybe a spouse. I guess it doesn't have to be a spouse, but anybody else in the chat who has really just going through a really difficult time in the past year. I know a lot of the counseling I've done for people in the past year, it's just been a rough year for everybody. And so if you've had to go through a deployment in the midst of all of that, it's for me, at least, it was almost more than I could take. And so as much as I wanted this time apart for me to just rock it and for it to be like somehow easy or easier than it was in the past, this one was really, really challenging for me. And I think the hardest part going into reintegration for me was that I didn't feel like I ended as well as I wanted to. In fact, you sent this GIF kind of towards the end of the deployment. It was this GIF of this runner that was finishing a race and literally finished the race.
Like tripped, then like started stumbling, and then literally their face actually broke
the ribbon.
The ribbon, and then they just fell straight down.
That's how I felt finishing the deployment. Like not only did I barely finish, but like it was not a beautiful ending. So that's how I actually started reintegration, was feeling very depleted, really low on energy, really struggling. In some ways, I think I felt insecure. I think of how I finished, wishing that I was in a stronger place to receive him home. And so that was really tough for me. And I know it was really tough for you. So maybe share what it was like for you, but also what it was like for you knowing that you're coming home to me, kind of wrestling with that.
So for service members coming home, when you actually like finally go wheels up, or whenever that, I guess the boat pulls into port, ship, I guess I'm not supposed to say boat for the Navy, ship, it's a ship, pulls into port, the large floaty thing, let's just say that. When that pulls into port and you're finally like, and you're released, like, and you're done, like that's the first major finish line. And you take a big sigh of relief and you're just ready to turn and face home and turn and face redeployment leave and all of the roles and responsibilities that you've been like trying to manage up underneath, then finally just slide off your shoulders, and you're finally able to just kind of sigh and breathe relief, and then really shift your energy from one place, all work related stuff, all the way to home related stuff, hopefully, that you're able to just drop all of that, turn and face home, and then really give your energy to something new that you haven't been able to really kind of go all in and really just, 110% give your effort towards. And so there's a finish line, but then there's also this extra little bit of, now you can really invest in something that you may feel more, hopefully you feel more of a reward for, you feel more of a close emotional tie to that and those people. And so you get kind of a second wind, even though you may be tired and you're trying to adjust to time zones, you get a kind of a second wind to reshift that energy towards home. And you're just looking at me. That's weird. It's weird. Like I've been so used to like looking at you there, and
I won't look at you anymore.
And look at me at there, and then I'll look at you. I'll look at your eyes in there. So anyhow,
Speaking of reintegration.
Yeah, it's just trying. It's like a cat, So when you reshift that energy, yeah, good. When you reshift that energy, I think we noticed the difference that you were depleted. Yeah. Like this has been where you've been devoting your energy, mm-hmm. like this environment. And these people, these two little young people, I say right over here, that's where their bedrooms are, but that you've been devoting all of your energy and your time and your effort to them. And understandably, you're like wanting to go, okay, tag, you're it. Yeah. Okay. I need a break. And that's totally great. So what we've been trying to balance is you really reintegrating within yourself, like getting back to a oneness. Because if you've got kids, then you're a single parent at home, geographically single parent, you're devoting all your time and effort and energy to their livelihood, to not just making sure they survive, but hopefully that they thrive. And you're giving away more than you actually have. And so you're constantly on this depleting, you may take 3 steps forward, but you take 4 steps back. Mm-hmm. So by the time I come home, I'm coming home with a little bit of extra energy because I'm coming into something new that I want to invest in more than I have been able to since I've been gone. But with you, you're coming in with depleted energy. And so we've been talking and discussing the last 2 weeks of like, how do you get that time for you? Because you're not like fully like re-energized and, charged up. Your battery isn't fully recharged. As well as how do then we reintegrate together? Yeah. So there's that balance that we've been trying to strike.
Yeah, and it's definitely a balance. And like I said, I wish that it would have been easier. You'd think that the more we go through the reintegration, the easier it gets. But there's always, I think, depending on the season that you're going through, there's always like, you still have to communicate. You still have to be very self-aware. And also, I think, aware of what's going on in your spouse and making sure that you're communicating about that too. And so I think for us, I was kind of like on this steady decline, in energy and focus and just, self-care, even a steady decline as we got towards the end. And Matt had extra time during this deployment to be able to go work out and do some self-care. And that doesn't mean it wasn't a struggle for you. Because there was a whole other different set of elements that were difficult and challenging and a struggle for him. And again, we've been talking about this through the series, and we'll continue to talk through it today too, because I think it really applies to the topic of reintegration. Is what typically happens the longer that you're apart, the more it's like you're on these parallel tracks, and you're relating to each other. You're trying to intersect those tracks as much as possible, but they're two very separate experiences that you're having, and it feels like two separate worlds that are on parallel tracks. And so reintegration is really a lot about how do you re-intersect and then kind of get on the same track. But the longer that you're apart, I think the more you carve, like you're carving into a piece of wood, you're carving this track that you don't even realize that you're creating habits and routines and patterns or ways of thinking or, that just kind of, you don't even realize that the way that you're loading the dishwasher or the routine that you're doing at night, that you're even connecting to that pattern or routine as if that's like something that brings you a sense of peace until there is that reintegration.
So I know one of the hard parts is when I come back in or when the service member comes back in, you want to be like, it seems like you have wanted to be very flexible and malleable to kind of how do we recreate this system together? And yet you had a system that was already working for you of like, here's the schedule, here's what we do. And that's the system that has kept you sane, because predictability and having a battle rhythm keeps people sane through all the chaos that happens during deployment, just by nature. And so there's been a loveliness to your willingness to go, okay, let's be flexible, let's be malleable. All right, let's give and take here. But at the same time, you're also giving up that thing that has kept you sane for a very long time. Concurrently with the service member, we usually get on a very regimented schedule of when we eat, when we work, when we go to the gym, when we sleep, and it's a habit and pattern. So you have 2 adults and kids that are coming back, and all the habits and patterns have just exploded. And now you're having to try and come back and go, okay, like what works now that you're back? And so there is, for a service member wanting to kind of not be into a habit and a pattern for a little while because it's been so regimented. And then there's also you probably wanting to be flexible and at the same time, watching two kids, no matter what age they are, anytime you mess with their schedule, teenagers especially, they're going to like take advantage of that.
I have a great example of this.
Yeah.
Okay. So the boys and I have two boys, they're teenagers, 13 and 16. And so throughout the whole deployment, we were working on like, what is our structure? What's the chore schedule? How do we help each other around the house? How do we like figure out? And honestly, I think we were just starting to really kind of nail it down and figure it out as Matt was going to be coming home. And so we had kind of figured out a new chore routine, a new schedule to our day, where it was something simple like at dinner, all hands on deck, everybody's helping clean up the kitchen. And then in the morning, one of the kids is going to unload the dishwasher. It just sets the tone for the rest of the day. And then the other kid does this over here. And we had just for like a couple of weeks established this new structure, and it was really working for us. And you could feel like all three of us kind of a little bit lighter, like, okay, this is working. We figured this out together. And so when you came home, it was a couple of things. Number one, the kids were so excited to have dad home, and I was too, that we kind of just threw the whole schedule out, like for the first week. Like we just kind of threw out, like just kind of, and that was a conscious choice of just going, you know what, let's just relax on chores. Let's relax on all of that. But I felt the internal kind of like, it wasn't even frustration. It just was like that adjustment that you're talking about, where it was like, ooh, this was really working. And now nobody's doing anything. And now there's more dishes. And now like we can't catch up. And like nobody's done chores in 4 days. And now I'm starting to feel kind of out of sync, but then I was like internally struggling with that. Like, do I mention it? Am I going to be seen as kind of the bad cop that gets everybody back on a chore schedule when we should be really excited and flexible that dad's home and not doing much of anything? And so just kind of wrestling with how do I handle that? And then we even tried to re-implement that chore routine, and it's kind of not quite working as well for us because there's more dishes to handle. There's more food that we're cooking at dinner time, and there's 4 people in the kitchen is almost too much for all hands on deck kind of thing. And so it kind of creates what was working during the deployment that really brought us a sense of peace and structure, and knowing what everybody's doing now has to be reevaluated. And it wasn't that it was wrong, and it also is okay that we can't do the same thing that we were doing then. We've got to figure out something new and different that works for us now. But for me internally, I was feeling all kinds of feelings. I think in the first week, there was, I'm excited that he's home. My person is back, and I want, it's been a stressful deployment. I can't wait to spend as much time with him as possible. And at the same time, the boys are excited to have him back. So they're trying to spend as much time with him as possible. And then I also have this thing that's going on of like, I'm tired and depleted and I need to like get out of this house for a while. And so I told you even like yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, I texted him because he was running one of our kids to a doctor's appointment. And I just apologized to him and said, I feel like I've been all over the place. Like, it's like, I want you here. And I also want to spend time on myself. And then I also want to spend as much time with you as possible. And I also want to go spend some time by myself. And I know I'm back and forth and all over the place. And he doesn't know which way to go, depending on what mood I'm in that moment. So it can be a roller coaster ride. And then navigating how to communicate through that is key.
Okay. So a couple of points based off what you were saying is, number one, communication is essential.
Yeah.
So it's good that, and I'm glad, and we have that open dialogue where I don't feel threatened by you saying that you need that time and space alone. We even talked about you going to grab a hotel room to just relax and kick your feet up and not feel like you've got to have like little teenage boys that are like, Mom, I can't find my shoes. You're wearing them. You are wearing your shoes that you're looking for. Please go to school. So there's that. Then there's also, whenever we are doing our RIP with somebody else who's coming to replace us, we have a continuity book. And we talked about this during the first deployment, in that part of the continuity book is an actual like weekly battle rhythm where you actually like create an Excel spreadsheet. And this is a little bit much, but you could at least jot it down of like, here's what the schedule is. like, here's the major rocks. Here's the things, So one of the ways you can do that, obviously, is with a family Google Calendar. And because we have teen boys, they're able to just shoot us stuff, and we accept it on the family Google Calendar, and we're both tracking. And then we can sit down and have our regular sync meetings that we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks. Of we really need to get back and do those calendar sync meetings where we're looking at, what are the big rocks each week? What are the ways things are done? Like, how is dinner being done now? And we always go back to this blueberry pancake moment.
Yeah, that was from our first deployment.
The first deployment, I got up on the first morning and I made blueberry pancakes, only to find out the boys no longer liked blueberry pancakes. And it was that realization of, like, this isn't a dad failure. This is just, we didn't have that level of communication of how they had moved on. And so really it's, it's not feeling bad for the service member coming back into the home. Do not allow yourself to feel bad of not knowing. Just when you run up into information, you're like, wow, that's totally new information. It doesn't mean that you're a bad mother or father or parent, husband or wife. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you didn't have that information. You have to get that information and then move forward. Part of the reintegration process are the bumps. We're not wanting there to not be bumps. It's good that there are bumps and there are obstacles, and it's good there's friction and conflict, because moving through that friction and conflict is actually what draws us back in closer together. It's not that it's always supposed to be smooth. There is going to be conflict and bumps and obstacles, but pushing through that says, okay, that's why we push through it, because you're my person and you're the one I want to do life with, And so that's the way we actually, it's probably one of the best ways of reintegrating and becoming back into that oneness of a couple.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things I'm going to answer a couple of the questions that you guys have put in already. These are great. And thank you for asking them. I think one of the things that I did differently this time, I think the first deployment, the first reintegration, I was afraid to say those things. I was afraid to say, here's what's changed since you've been gone, or here's what we've been doing, because I didn't want him to feel bad. And I learned from that first time that no, he actually does. There's no way for him to win if he doesn't know, right. And he wants to get it right. And so I think what I did better though this time is even though it doesn't feel good to communicate it, trying my best to communicate those moments of going, oh, hey, here's what we've been doing, to go back to the question about the chores, like how did we, adjust, once you did come back, is being able to honestly say, actually, this is what we've been doing and it's been working. And so Aiden does this in the mornings, and then we all do this at dinner. And this is what the routine is, and it's been working, and your response was great. He's like, okay, wow. Okay, let's do that. And everybody, all hands on deck. And I think it was a couple days of trying that but it's also about me being open to the change and the adjustment that needs to happen. If I'm saying, no, this is what worked for us, and so this is where you need to fit in, and this is how it needs to stay. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that are different. Like I said, there's more dishes, there's more food, there's more clothes, there's another person in the house again. And so things do need to adjust, and I need to be open to that adjustment. So to answer the question, as far as how do you get past and find what works now, I think that's part of it. I think it's number one, it's articulating, oh, hey, you didn't realize that we have been doing this routine. And it's also, considering we have teen boys, it's also good for him to know so that he can hold the boys accountable if they're trying to get out of chores or whatever, or if they're just, excited and haven't been thinking about chores, that he can join me in that parenting and go, hey guys, if that's part of the routine, let's jump in and do that together.
Yeah.
So I think it's about communicating and being open for a new routine. And here's the truth. Those of you who are the spouses at home during this time apart, the truth is that during that time apart, there's always adjustments, right? There's always these growth moments where what you were doing isn't really working as well as it used to work. And you've got to adjust it and find the new strategy, the new chore list, the new routine, the new bedroom routine or a nighttime routine. And so there's always adjustments. And this is just one of those. And so if we're kind of digging our heels in and going, no, you have to fit into the way that we did it while you were gone, then it kind of sets up somebody for it just may be time for an adjustment. So, okay. So there's some really good questions. Can you address conflicting feelings when your spouse returns? For spouses who've been super isolated due to COVID-19 and gained a lot of independence, new family routines, and feeling anxious about how the service member will acclimate to changes. So, I think that's a great one for us to address. I know personally for me, did you want to go?
Yeah. So one thing I want to say for service members, and I noticed this after the first deployment was, and that coming off a combat deployment, that was much different than the one I just came off of. And there is a lot of attention in the military placed on reintegration for the service member. And it's very much like they look at the spouses and they're like, okay, now treat them with kid gloves and take it easy, and make sure they're surrounded by cotton and make sure they're just taken care of because it's all about them, right? They have done X, Y, and Z and they need to come home and blah, 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 blah. And even like, what was it, last year or 2 years ago when I was at CGSC, there was a guest speaker that actually got up there, not a guest speaker. Somebody actually got up there and said, hey, this is going to be a hard year for them. So make sure that when they come home,
take their backpack
off and hand them a drink and give them their slippers.
Spouses did not respond.
And we all were like, what? No, that is so. So I say all that to say this, like service members, it is your responsibility to draw the line and say, look, here's what I feel like I need. But here, I also recognize you need time too. Like you have been working very hard, extremely hard, dedicating yourself. So I'm holding you accountable, service members, to not go in and just take, okay? Because it is also your responsibility to now give. And giving can also mean giving space, okay? And that can also mean you may want, like, I love coming home because it's very comfortable here. I love the house and I love, sitting around here, but I also could see in her eyes, especially with COVID and lockdowns and ice storms and all the things that have kept me working at home.
I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. Like literally she's bouncing off the walls. Right. And she's like, I got to get out of here. I got to go somewhere. So, okay, cool. I may want to sit here today.
Oh, I do want to share this. This is a great example.
Okay.
This is a great example. No, like one of the first outings that we actually had, like he had been confined to one small space. You service members know what that's like. Being confined to this one small space where he couldn't even really get outside the area much more than that. So he was so excited to just come home and get out and whatever. And I can't remember what kept us close to home, but I was very excited. We had not communicated well before the outing. I was excited because I had not left because of COVID. I had not left outside of like a 20-mile radius for like 5 months, and so when we're talking about getting out of the house, I was ready to go like 45 minutes away and go do some exploring that I couldn't do by myself and have my person with me. But I didn't communicate well that day. And so what we ended up doing is bouncing around to all of the stores that I had seen a million times over the last 5 months within that radius, but I didn't communicate to him and say that that's not what I wanted to do.
It was like an episode, it was like The Notebook. It's like, what do you want?
but I was so afraid to tell him because I don't know why. I think because I think that was enough for him and he was just enjoying going to the grocery store and going here and going anywhere, but I'm like, I've been to this grocery store so many times. But I didn't communicate well. And so I want to be authentic with that today because it's not easy to share the things that you need to share. And it's not easy to communicate the things you need to communicate. But if you don't communicate it, to be honest, by the end of that date out together, I was not in a good place and it ended up being miserable for him because I was not happy and all he wanted was for me to be happy with him. But I didn't communicate that what I was really needing was just to get out of that radius or to not go to the same stores I've been to a million times. So it's not easy to, when we talk about conflicting feelings, when your spouse, it is hard to communicate those conflicting feelings. And I do want us to talk about one other kind of those conflicting feelings that comes up a lot for couples. It's not just us. A lot of spouses during this deployment have even shared with me that, it's hard to watch if you're on a deployment, if you're a service member and you're on a deployment where you have that freedom and flexibility to spend lots of time working out and getting in great shape, and you don't have access to good food, that's understandable. Remember, two parallel tracks that are very different, but difficult for each other in different ways, right? It was really hard for him to come home and be in great shape. And here I was on that steady decline, not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually. And just, I was in that decline. And he came home, what felt like to me, he came home great, like in a really good place and like ready to serve and lots of energy and ready to be intentional with the kids, as he should be. And yet, as soon as he came home with all of that energy, it was almost like I looked in a mirror and I really saw just how tired I was, just how depleted I was. And I was definitely not matching him and the energy that he had. And that was really tempting for me to go inward and shame myself and be in a place of like, wow, I'm doing terrible as a parent. I'm doing terrible as a wife. I'm doing terrible for myself personally in my own self-care. And now I'm feeling all this insecurity, because what I really would have loved to have happened is for him to come home, for me to have lots of energy in the best shape of my life and matching where he is at personally and just in personal growth. And that just was not our reality this time. And so when it comes to those conflicting feelings, that was a lot of the up and down personally for me of like, what do I do with that? What do I do with the feelings that I'm having about myself? And some of those I had to be very honest with him and share, this is where I'm at and I'm really having a hard time. Like, you're like super intentional with the kids. And I feel like I haven't been that intentional for like a month or so. And I had to sit back and do some journaling of my own and go, actually, no, like I was the one taking them to doctor's appointments and getting the groceries and doing all those things that was spread out through that deployment. I was very intentional with them. It just, the energy looks different right now. And then when it comes to like that self-care, I really had to be at a place where I go, okay, I could sit here and beat myself up, or I could choose, do I want to do the self-care that I need and ask for the self-care that I need so that I can get to a place where I can start climbing my way back up, where we do match each other again, where we are in that place where I have the energy and I'm able to take care of myself and honor myself, but also honor our relationship. And because I personally have a choice. I can choose to stay really low and decline further, or I can do the hard work and ask for what I need so that I can get to a place where we can be both of us in a good spot again.
So for the service member, it's incredibly important that you take the responsibility to create a safe place for your supporting spouse to be able to voice those concerns. Because going back to what I was saying earlier with the way that it's been shaped for the last 20 years at war, it's very much been about, unfortunately, often the service member and not about the supporting spouse and what it is that they need in order to thrive and to flourish and to become the fullness of themselves. And so you've got to be the champion of that. You've got to not only create the safe place and the safe space, you've got to be the champion of that. And know full well coming home that it's no longer, I'll say this, it's no longer about you. That's what reintegration is. It's like, it's no longer about me as a one. It's about how do we then become the one that we were. And this is, our reintegration hasn't been that hard for the last couple of weeks. We've been talking about it, knowing that today was coming up, but especially because we were journaling the entire time. We have like 750 pages of journals over the course of 161 days. And so we knew what was going on in one another's lives. It's that much more difficult if you're coming home and you have no concept of what you're walking into or what's walking into your house.
Yeah, and we have a great question, and keep bringing those questions in, because we'll definitely camp out on most of your questions as we get to that last segment of the webinar today. Because there's a couple of things that we kind of sat down and really kind of fleshed out, like what is it that we've actually gone through, and how can we teach it in some content that you'll be able to walk away and actually apply it to your lives. And so I want to make sure that we go through that today, and then we'll kind of give that extra time to some extra questions. But before we get into that content, I do want to address this one question that says, how do you balance being understanding of the service member having a stressful time and needing downtime, but also the member at home going through their own stressors? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a valid question because every couple is different, right? Like this could have very easily been switched, right? This could have been where I was thriving at home and the service member came home or Matt came home and was really needing downtime to deal with jet lag and deal with just kind of turning his brain off. We hear a lot of stories of service members coming home and sleeping things off for days or needing to play video games and disconnect. And you may need to be able to speak to some of that as well. But mm-hmm. I think that my answer would be, when it came to us, this is just what I do. And so, personally, every time I had my own feelings of like need, of like, I need time to myself, or I need to go outside of that radius and get out of the house. Or we've even been talking about the last couple of days about, should I go get a hotel room and have that night to myself? And we have an opportunity to go out with friends instead. And so I have this difficult choice. Do I go and spend time with community because I really need that? Or do I need self-care more? Which one do I need more? And how do I, so every time that I kind of found myself in that place of need and deciding, how do I take care of myself and ask for what I need? I think there was also a part of me that kind of didn't push it down, but kind of paused on it and kind of thought to myself, all right, Matt also has needs here. What is it that he is needing? And I think we've been really trying hard to just check in with each other of like, this is kind of what I'm feeling like I need. What is it that you need? And how are you doing with your integration? And are you getting the rest that you need before you go back to work? Are you getting the time that you want for the boys? And I mean, even yesterday, maybe it was even, I can't, all the days are blurring together, but I was kind of tiptoeing around, something I was wanting to read.
So yesterday she walks in the kitchen and I'm like cleaning the kitchen and she goes, is it okay if I go sit and read a book? And I was like, what the crap? Like, be a grown adult. Like, the boys are like doing their own thing. And I literally was like, okay, I'm not even going to respond to that. I was like, repeat after me. And she was like, oh, so she's playing. He
walked me through. I want to go read.
No. It was, I am going to go read it. There's a difference between can I go read a book? I want to go read a book, and I am going to read a book.
Yeah.
Like, at that point in time, you're like, I'm going to go read. There you go, grown adult. The ball is in your court, grown adult. Go make grown adult decisions. Well,
and if we're not careful, we can find ourselves tiptoeing around each other and managing each other's emotions. And so for me, I was like, that was my way of saying, I'm willing to sacrifice what I'm needing right now if you feel a certain way. And what he was trying to help me do is like, if that's something that you want or need right now, then own what it is that you need and go and do that thing. And if I have feelings about that, now, if I'm like spending 10 hours a day reading a book and I'm not engaging with him or the family, then that's a whole other topic, right? Yeah. But this is talking about me spending an hour or 30 minutes going to read a book. Yeah. So I think it's about, how do we have these conversations and make sure that we're communicating in kindness, communicating assertively though, and doing our best to not be really passive and not owning what we need. Also not being passive aggressive, which is like, I'm going to wait till you guess that I'm miserable and then somehow figure it out and help me with what I need. And instead just asking for it.
Yeah. So you have to phrase it as in you have to know yourself well enough to know what it is that you need and what you want, and to be able to articulate that within like a defined set. So for me, if I'm the service member, if I'm like, hey, I really feel like I need to go spend time with, our oldest son and really check in with him. So I would like to go do this, and this with our oldest son. And I can kind of give those parameters. It sets expectations. So you can go, okay, I put it in my mind. You're going to be gone from here to here with him. Great. That's good. Now I need to know what we're going to do with the youngest. Conversely, if you're like, hey, I really need to go do X, Y, and Z for the morning, and I'll be back around lunchtime or after lunch, or I need to be gone the whole day and to do X, Y, and Z, then it's just me going, okay, cool. All right. Now I can set that expectation. I can work around that. And so you've got to know what the difference between your need and your want, be able to articulate that, speak for yourself, and set those expectations well, so that we can do that, so we can integrate this. That's why sitting down with a calendar is so important. It requires intentionality, because if you attempt to do reintegration by accident, kind of meandering through each little day, it's not going to go well.
Yeah. One of the things that we were talking about, like how do we sum up some of the things that you guys or that we're going through, is two things. We're calling it like mines in a minefield, because if you're not communicating about it, if you're not addressing it within yourself and being very self-aware, it's almost like going through a minefield and you're going to step on a mine at some point. Something's going to explode or you're going to get into a conflict. And so these are just two things that we would want you to just really be mindful of as you're going through integration. So the first mine is the direction of energy. And this, we've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but think of it through this framework that when the service member comes back into the home, the energy shifts, the patterns of where attention is being given shifts. And so where for me and the boys, it was kind of the three of us kind of like, it wasn't like any one of us was revolving around one or the other. It was whoever needed it the most. We were revolving around that person. You know, when Matt came home, you know, for the boys, their attention is now, their energy is going towards Matt. And so your kids, depending on their ages, that energy is going to shift towards them. Now, anytime a pattern shifts in a family, it's going to create some level of chaos somehow, somewhere. And that's really important for you to remember. And so when the energy was shifting from the boys to him, that was an adjustment for me. I don't think I was quite prepared for that. And so I suddenly felt like I was kind of on the outside. They were just so excited. I had this like really humorous reaction to the first night we had dinner together, and we were making pork tenderloin, and I had bacon, and we were putting bacon around the pork tenderloin. And it was not the first time we had bacon wrapped pork tenderloin. And my oldest was like, I'm so glad Dad's home, because now we're having bacon around the pork tenderloin. I'm like, I've done that so many times, like even during the deployment. Why is he getting the attention for it?
Dad dinner.
And I know, and I felt like suddenly like, oh, like my energy and my efforts were not being seen, and it was all being directed towards Dad. Mm-hmm. Now, I had to like catch that pretty quickly, but I was starting to spiral and feel unseen. And so it's really just being aware of where the energy is going and why, and that's going to happen, and it's natural.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the service member and that energy?
Oh, well, yeah. It's like I said earlier, you know, once you finish the deployment and you finish that finish line, then you have like kind of another surge of energy to get home and to see people that are familiar, being in comfortable situations. And so that kind of re-energizes you, because you're going back into something where you probably have a lot more options ahead of you, you know, in front of you. And so things are more comfortable. They are more familiar. And so you bring that energy, and the energy is like, how do I plug back into the family? Okay. Maybe that's from the guilt of, this is my ex deployment and how many times I've been gone, and I want to come back in, and I want to, you know, not waste a moment. I want to make sure that I've checked in with the kids, checked in with my spouse, and make sure that we are all good and everybody is, you know, 5 by 5. And so there you have that little kind of that new level of energy. It doesn't mean that you're not going to burn out quickly, because you can be spending a lot of energy trying to make up for lost time, but that you have that energy, and it's very much directed outwardly to the family, usually.
Yeah. And for those supporting spouses, typically what's happening is by kind of like that decline that, like I was describing, you get to this place where you really want to take care of yourself more. And so the energy is starting to go like, how do I take care of myself? How do I get myself, where I spend that time by myself or recharge or something? It's you're anxious to kind of do that tag you're it kind of thing. And so all the energy is actually being directed towards yourself. Now, of course, I know we're excited that the service member's home. I'm so excited Matt's home, and I do have energy that's being directed towards him. But we're talking about like, there's this conflict of like, I'm excited that you're here. I'm excited that the kids are excited that you're here. But I also need to take care of myself. And I don't know how to do that when there's all this energy going towards.
It's kind of it's like a baton handoff in a relay race. I mean, once you've run that race and you've run your 100 meters, your 400 meters, you're kind of exhausted. You want to hand the baton off, and you kind of, you may jog a little bit while the next person is like full off on a full speed sprint, but it running out of energy in my brain.
The second mind that we want you to be thinking about, just again, we're talking about the framework of a way to think of reintegration, is the environment and the impact of the environment and how that plays a part in reintegration. And so we kind of touched on this a little bit when I was talking about I just needed to get out of the house and kind of expand that radius a little bit. But it is really important to understand these two parallel tracks and how it's been impacted by environment in general. And so for the service member, if they've been kind of in this we've been in a lockdown kind of situation too.
Yeah.
So how COVID, and some of your questions are asking how it relates to COVID in the last year, we'll answer those. But I'll speak for the supporting spouse.
Yeah. So there's two ways that it could go for the service member. And I've experienced both of them in the past 2 weeks. Being in a confined area where you're very much on lockdown and you've got your little circle that you kind of run, like your little triangle of work, DFAC, shower, gym, and you just keep going back and running that little square. You can very much long to just want to be home and walk around barefoot and want to be in comfortable clothes and want to not shave for a little while and not have to put on a mask and just want to just kind of be and just kind of take a big sigh of relief and just kind of flop in very familiar, comfortable space at home and not want to go anywhere. But you can also similarly go, wow, I have been on lockdown. I do want to go out. I do want to actually see what a restaurant looks like or go to a store. And I want to go to a grocery store and I want to pick out something that isn't shipped to me, or isn't delivered to me. I want to pay for it myself and feel that freedom and that level of agency in the world. So you can go back and forth between those two areas. I think.
Isn't it interesting that that's like an adventure?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And for me, it's a chore.
Yeah, like going to the grocery store, it's like, oh my God, I could get
do we have to go to the grocery store?
I could get Fruit Loops, I'm very excited about that.
We could have Fruit Loops delivered. That's, I think, a huge piece of this is like, you're ready to have this adventure, maybe even that day out. And what's the difference between how you would approach a date or adventure? And some service members are going to come home and it's too much to go out around that many people and that many stores and that many options.
They may have been living in a tent with 24, 48 other people and they're just tired of people.
Well, and you can see that can also be ripe for sabotage, right? It's like, let's get out, let's go do something. And then you get out and then it's too much and things get sabotaged. Right. And, and it's important for both of you. Remember that what you feel and what you think and what your opinions are and what your perspectives are in any of these circumstances are both individually valid. Like what you're experiencing as a supporting spouse at home is very valid and true to you. And what the service member is going through, it's very valid and true to them. And it's not necessarily that one's more right than the other, but I think a lot of this reintegration is understanding and honoring each other's perspectives and needs and wants and where you're both coming from and not feeling shame for that, not feeling like I had to get over my shame of no, it was actually a very stressful deployment and that's okay. Now for me, what's not okay is if I stay down there, but that doesn't say anything about me. It doesn't say anything about me as a spouse that I didn't rock it better, I guess. Thank you for listening to the Life Giver podcast. If you're enjoying these episodes, please share the podcast with other service couples that may benefit from the show. If you'd like more information about me or Life Giver, head on over to CoreyWeathers.com or life-giver.org.